Full disclosure, when Mark from Sony sent us the ZV-E10 cameras, he also sent us each a single individually wrapped Swedish fish, probably leftover Halloween candy from last year, one for myself and one for Jordan. And I do love Swedish fish, so I fully intend to eat this and accept this payment. So yeah, best camera of the year, Jordan? Welcome back, Deep Review TV viewers. It's Chris Nichols here. Now, last year, Sony released a very interesting vlog-style camera, the ZV-E10. It had a 1-inch size sensor, fixed lens, but some very interesting features for, being creative or doing your own vlogging and stuff like that. So this year, we're now looking at a brand new camera from them. They've taken a lot of what made the ZV-E10 interesting and have now brought it to a APS-C interchangeable E-mount lens camera. We're going to play with it today. I just want to let you guys know that we only have one Sony ZV-E10 with us today. So we're going to be doing the majority of the video today on the actual camera. You won't see me holding it in my hands very often, but I will be vlogging with it. And of course, Jordan's going to be shooting the video with it. You'll get a good representation of its quality, and you're going to see that at the bottom of the screen when we are actually shooting on the ZV-E10. And we'll give you lots of beauty shots, so you'll have no doubt on how this camera looks in your hands. Now, the ZV-E10 shares a lot of the same guts as the Sony a6100, but on the outside it looks fairly different because, of course, the purpose is completely different. Now, it does have a pretty plasticky look and feel to it. This is the white version here, and that might be, adding to that effect. It actually reminds me a lot of maybe an older NEX3 or NEX5 in the hand, but the button layout's totally different. Let's start on the top here. We do have a hot shoe, and it will work with flashes, but it is a multi-interface shoe, which will, of course, work with things like their shotgun microphone system. We had the same thing on the ZV-E10, and we also have the exact same audio pickup. So this is now a 3-pickup stereo microphone system. We liked how that worked on the ZV-E10, and we're going to test it here again today. And it does have the exact same dead cat sort of hot shoe mounted dead cat that goes on top to protect you from wind noise on that microphone. Now, the zoom rocker here on the shutter button is now for power zooms, and that could be kind of useful if you're doing a little bit of one-handed kind of work or you want to do a slow crash. But yeah, it's not your on-off switch. That's actually up here now on a dedicated switch that you click back and forth. Very big record button, easy to see. We have the option to switch between photo, video, and our slow motion and quick speed kind of options here with this button. And then here we have our defocus control. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. The back of the camera is very familiar. Menu function, same kind of cruddy back dial as you find on the other Alpha cameras. One thing that is different though is the garbage button now doubles as your product showcase button. Now this is one of our favorite features on the ZV-E10, perfect for people doing product endorsements and things like that. You basically hold up a product in front of you, the camera seamlessly focuses to it. When you pull it away, it goes right back to the presenter. We love that on the ZV-E10. But now here on the ZV-E10, because we have even thinner depth of field options with our lenses, it looks very dramatic, as you can see in our intro example here. We were worried that the autofocus wouldn't be able to handle that shallower depth of field, that it might hunt a bit, but it actually did it beautifully. Now on the side of the camera here, we have some interesting changes compared to the a6100. We have our mic jack here at the top under this port, and then onto the side door, we do have now a headphone jack. That's a nice feature. Micro HDMI, I mean, of course, we didn't expect to have any more space there, but now this camera charges through a USB-C port, so this is a little bit more advanced. Now the back panel, this is the big change. It's a fully articulating back panel, 1.44 million dots, perfectly usable. It is touchscreen, but we're still using the older menu system, and the touchscreen still doesn't work in the menu, and that's really annoying, especially if you are using a vlogging camera and you want to make quick changes. And of course, all of these changes don't leave any space for an EVF, and that's the main differentiator here between an a6100 and this camera. If I was doing strictly photography, I would probably still go an a6100. I like having the EVF, although I'm kind of torn on this because it's kind of the worst EVF on the market, but something is still better than nothing. And in fact, a lot of photographers don't even like the articulating screens. So, they're probably going to prefer the layout on the 6100 anyways. But for video, this makes a ton of sense. And EVF isn't quite as useful in video terms. And for vlogging, well, I mean, you really do need this. Now, as to be expected, we have a W series battery in this camera. Now, that is, of course, the same as many other Alpha cameras, but it will give you better battery life than a ZV-E10. And just like the ZV-E10, you can also run this camera off of USB power while recording, which is nice if you're shooting the home studio and you don't want to have to worry about battery life as an issue. We also have a single SD card slot. It is a UHS-1 card slot, basically what you'd find in the a6100, but fast enough to support the video features of this camera. Now, if you're looking at the older ZV-1 package and then the ZV-E10 with the 16-50 kit lens, they're roughly the same price. So I'm trying to figure out what's the better way to go. Honestly, if I was just going to stick with the ZV-E10 and the 16-50 kit lens, which honestly isn't that great a lens, I'd probably just go ZV-1 instead. I mean, I'm getting a brighter aperture lens, albeit on a smaller sensor, but I'm getting a smaller camera. I'm getting built-in ND filters. These are really nice features. And frankly, the 16-50 kit lens on the ZV-E10 at 5.6, for example, at 50 millimeters is going to give me the same kind of look and depth of field, or at least very similar to what I'd get on the ZV-1 anyways. So all this, long story short, means that if I'm going to go the ZV-E10 package, the real benefit here is because I have the option for interchangeable lenses. Yes, it adds some cost, but it doesn't have to be ridiculous. There's lots of affordable E-mount Sony lenses. There's lots of nice Sigmas, for example, out there that keep the cost down. And if you do have the budget and requirements, you can then put on some quite nice expensive glass for this ZV-E10 as well. Now, just to give you guys an example, I've got a 50 millimeter E-mount lens on the ZV-E10 filming me right now. We're shooting at 5.6 to mimic what the kit lens would do for depth of field, but now check this out. Now we're shooting at f1.8. I think you can see the background is dramatically different. Shallow depth of field is a very popular look, absolutely, and it's also useful in low light situations where you don't have a lot of light and you don't want to crank your ISO up to record photos and video. So this is really the main advantage of going to a ZV-E10, and it's something that the ZV-1 or a smartphone just cannot do in video. All right, it's time for our practical vlog test. So first off, I've got the 10-18 f4 lens on here. It's optically stabilized, but I'm also using the active steady shot in camera to kind of smooth things out as much as possible. I am shooting at 24 frames per second here, so it's gonna be a little herky-jerky. I'm also using the new Bluetooth grip. You can pair it with the camera and it gives you that nice extension and stable platform to hold. This is also a great test for the microphone because I'm using the internal microphones right now with the dead cat so you guys can hear how that sounds. Now, some other features I like here, I've got a tally lamp on the camera and I also have a red frame indicator around the screen, which basically means I'm not going to miss the fact that I'm recording, and that can be very, very useful to have. The last thing that I'm doing here, I've got soft skin mode turned on to mid because I need all the help I can get. Okay, so let's talk about the defocus control button here. Now, we had the same function on the ZV-1, but as we've talked about, the ZV-1 doesn't quite give you the same dramatic shallow depth of field options that you can get with the ZV-E10 and the right lenses. So how this works is basically, Jordan's gonna push the button right now, and it's going to open up the aperture really wide automatically and defocus that background. Now, you may have noticed, though, there's a little bit of a flutter and flicker in the exposure, so I wouldn't do this mid-roll like we just did now unless you had some way to cut around it or put B-roll over it to cover that up. Now, one other thing I want you to notice now, because the aperture is really wide, the shutter speed's now gone really fast. And if I move my hands in front of the camera, you probably see it's kind of robotic with that fast shutter speed look, which we don't like to do. So now Jordan's gonna click it again. It's gonna go from the defocus look to what they call the clear look. And now the background should be more in focus. My shutter speed should have slowed down and it probably looks like a little bit more natural movement, but we don't get that same nice shallow depth of field. Now, I do want to point out, this is really a function aimed at beginners who just want a one-touch, easy solution to go from background in focus to background out of focus. If you are more into manual videography, I would do the whole, use ND filters, set your aperture manually, set your shutter speed manually, and really control the look that you want without getting that weird motion blur kind of effect.
Jordan here to talk about the video capability, and it's the same sensor that we've seen in a whole bunch of the A6000 series cameras. So that means a few things. It means low light performance and actual image sharpness is excellent. It is oversampling from that 24 megapixel sensor, unless you switch to 30 frames per second, which will introduce a little bit of a crop. The other thing that this sensor is notorious for is the rolling shutter performance on this is some of the worst out there. If you're planning to move really quickly, do a lot of panning and things like that, well, that's where I think the ZV-1 makes more sense. That sensor can read out incredibly quickly, unlike this one. One of the biggest drawbacks for video shooting on the A6100 is that it had none of Sony's picture profiles for giving you a less contrasty or gradable image. You had to jump up to the A6400 for that, but now with the ZV-E10, you get the full complement of Sony's profiles. So you get their Cine profiles, their stills profiles, and S-Log2, 3, and HLG. Now, right now we're shooting on S-Log2, which I think is as flat as you ever want to go with an 8-bit camera like this. It does give you the option for S-Log3 and HLG, photography, but you want a 10-bit camera. Otherwise, as you can see here, you'll find your skin tones just start to really fall apart. But I love that Sony has included this feature. It is one of the big advantages over the 6100.
Okay, so maybe the ZV-E10 is not going to be camera of the year, all right, granted, but I still think it's a very compelling product. I mean, first off, I do encourage you guys to watch the ZV-1 video that we did, because a lot of the features are the same as on this camera and pertain. And one of our main takeaways from that video was that although a lot of features like product showcase, for example, might seem like gimmicks, they're actually very useful tools. But now we have a camera that gives us better control over depth of field and lets us expand well beyond the focal range limitations of the ZV-1. I mean, the real thing here is if you're gonna get this camera, you want to get other lenses. Otherwise, there's no point. If you're gonna stick with this in the kit lens, the ZV-1 is basically doing a very similar thing. If you want to do photography exclusively, I would just get an A6100. But if I wanted a hybrid camera that could have the image quality that the A6100 gives me, the amazing autofocus that that camera gives me, and I'm okay without an EVF, and I want to have better video capabilities, well, the ZV-E10 might suit what you want to do there as well. Regardless, get some extra lenses and you could do some very creative stuff with this camera. As usual, we really appreciate you guys joining us for this video and hope you found it useful. Do check out our ZV-1 and A6100 videos while you're at it. Why not? And go to dpreview.com. There will be articles on the ZV-E10 as well as many more cameras to check out. Thank you so much for joining us. And this Swedish fish, I think I've earned this. I'm going to enjoy this right now. Oh, it's so good. Who needs an EVF, man? Forget it. I take it back. ZV-E10, best alpha camera all time.